Good afternoon, North Point family, and welcome to our Thursday devotional. This Thursday, we are going to devote our attention to Maundy Thursday. This being Maundy Thursday. Maundy Thursday is the Thursday of Passion Week, the Thursday right before Good Friday, which is, of course, the Friday before Easter Sunday. And basically, Maundy Thursday, Maundy, the word Maundy, comes from the Latin word for mandate or command. And it refers to the command that Jesus gives to his disciples at the Last Supper in John chapter 13, verse 34. There, Jesus will say to his disciples, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have loved one another." And there are two primary events that we think of on Maundy Thursday. It is the Last Supper and also Jesus washing the feet of his disciples in John chapter 13. And it is that event that I want to focus on today as we consider and reflect on what we call Maundy Thursday. And what I want to do is just read John 13, verses 1 through 11. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you are clean." For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." I'm not going to give a full exposition of these 11 verses here, but I do want to focus on the importance of this event of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples, because it's around and surrounding the context of that event that Jesus gives this new command for the disciples to love others as he has loved them, to wash the feet of others as Christ has washed the feet of these disciples. The first thing we need to know is the context of chapter 13 here. John, the Gospel of John, is broken up really into two sections, chapters 1 through 12, and then chapter 13 through the rest of the Gospel. So we have just gotten done with the first section of John, and now we're beginning in a new section of John that is really going to deal with Jesus' death into his resurrection for the rest and the remainder of the gospel. And what you have at the end of the last section in chapter 12 is Jesus being rejected by the Jewish people. And so here in the new section in chapter 13, what is it that Jesus is doing with his 12 disciples? Of course, except Judas, who will betray him. But he is setting up a new messianic era, a new covenant community. You think of that number 12, 12 disciples, as opposed to the old covenant 12 tribes of Israel. That old covenant people of God have just rejected Jesus at the end of the first section in chapter 12. Now, beginning in chapter 13, he's inaugurating and calling out this new messianic era that is represented by these 12 disciples. And what is to dominate and take focus in this new messianic era is service. really the word that we can boil down for what we read here and throughout the Lord's Supper and even his prayer in Gethsemane to the cross is the word service. And we see, first of all, the service of Christ to his disciples here with this washing of their feet. Now, the washing of the feet was a common gesture that took place in the ancient Near East. Oftentimes, you would walk, and in that dusty, sort of dirty terrain, when you would go into a guest's house, that guest would have the servant of the home wash the feet of that individual coming into their home. It was a hospitable action done by that master welcoming in that guest into the home. But it was never the master that would wash the feet. It was always the master's servant. And more than that, it wasn't just the master's servant, it was a Gentile slave, oftentimes. In other words, those that were considered filthy dogs, oftentimes even labeled the sinners, and they were slaves within the house of their Jewish master, and it was them that would get down on their knees and wash the feet of the individual. So not only is Jesus exemplifying just service in general, it is an extravagant, humbling service. He is identifying himself with a Gentile slave, with those who were called by the Jewish community at the time filthy dogs. It is a humbling, self sacrificing, self effacing service that he is rendering unto these disciples. And of course, we see that this is very much metaphorical as we read here in this chapter. It is symbolizing and pointing to the washing of his disciples with his sacrificial blood that he is soon going to shed the next day on Good Friday. So it's a service that is not just service in general, but it's a service where he identifies himself with even a Gentile slave. It is a lowly service, and it is a service where he lays down his life for his sheep. And it is that kind of service that he calls his new messianic era, his new covenant people to a lowly service and a service that is willing to give our lives for our friends. As he says elsewhere, what greater love than to lay down your life for your friends? So we see this extravagant, monumental, unfathomable service that the Lord of glory, God himself, as Philippians 2 will say, did not see fit to make himself equal with God, but became a servant, became a man. And we see how low he actually made himself here as he identifies himself with a slave, a Gentile slave, washing the feet of his disciples. And what does it symbolize? It symbolizes that blood that he will shed, that sacrificial blood for the sins of his people, for the sins of his disciples, that sacrificial blood that will haunt Jesus in Gethsemane as he considers the weightiness of what it is he will be dealing with the very next day. And it is this kind of service that is to be the paradigm for us and how we serve not only each other within the covenant community, the new covenant community, but serve our neighbors, our friends, and all those we come in contact with, especially in times such as these. So let us reflect on that command of the Lord this Maundy Thursday, that we are to love others as Christ has loved us. God bless.